Very good evening, friends. Meeting again in the session of Organon philosophy, and we have started discussing about the chapter number 11 from the Kant's philosophy. Earlier chapter, he has explained the concepts regarding the materialism, specifically in the medicines, and two concepts, the dynamic concepts and material concepts in detail. And in this chapter, he tried to explain the correlation between the vital force in the state of health, in the state of disease, and in the state of cure. So what exactly happens and how the disease develops and how it goes, that all things he tried to explain over there in this chapter. So what he started that whenever we have to understand human being, we have to understand the dynamics, the mind, body, and soul. At the same time, the material body as well as the dynamics. That is the vital force, vital principle. And if this vital principle gets affected by any means, by any dynamic influence, it always disturbs first itself and it reflects in the form of some signs and symptoms. And those signs and symptoms which are reflected to which we label by the name of disease. So this is too important. There is no other way with which we can understand the person is diseased. There is nothing morbid which is visible. Whatever morbid is there is all invisible. And whatever morbid is there, visible is there, is the end product. So this is what we have to understand over there. So he is explaining the concept or role of vital force in the state of health, how it tries to maintain the balance between mind, body, and soul. At the same time, he tries to explain the how it gets affected, ultimately reflected in the form of a disorder. So we have discussed about those things. Let us start with the next paragraph. Body can. So we have finished up to the paragraph. The body can affected, the tissues can be affected, and ultimates can be affected by ultimates. There can be friction between ultimates. Things in this world can collide with other things in this world, and they may destroy each other. Ultimates may destroy ultimates, but such a thing as a disease occurring in ultimates, except through the dynamic changes, is impossible. And this is what we have learned in yesterday's lecture. That whatever ultimate happens to be there, it is the result of dynamic derangement of the vital force, ultimately reflected in the form of some tissue change or cellular change. And then he explains, nor can any agency which is ultimate act upon the human economy curatively, turning into vital order the innermost of the life. The vital disorder cannot be turned into order except by something similar in quality to the force. It is not similitude in quantity that we want. It invades and measures, but it is similarity in quality, in power, in plane, that must be sought for. So see what he explains, that if the disease, we understand it is the product of the dynamic derangement of vital force, then if you want to treat that dynamic disorder, your treatment should be a dynamic. Your treatment should reach to that specific level, to that specific plane. Then and then it is possible to cure that patient. If the derangement is dynamic and if you are using material measures, it will not at all cure the disorder. It may palliate, it may suppress, but it never cures the disorder. Because disease happens to be there in a different plane. We'll take a simple example. There is a disappointment in love of a fellow, and he becomes so disturbed because of that. He started getting a headache, and that headache was not getting settled. It was continuous since last 6 months. The continuous headache was there. People have diagnosed it as migraine, but the cause of it is the dynamic derangement, that is the disappointment in life, ultimately reflected in the migraine. So he was labeled by the migraine, taking migrainal tablet, but till the migrainal effect of migrainal is there, he feels better. After the effect has vanished, it again he starts again gaining the same thing. So what is that? Because plane disease happened in the different plane, because of which this disorder have been developed, and now you are treating it with material measures. It is not possible to cure. But if my suggestion to all of you, please keep your mics off. Whenever you get joined, keep your mics off. It disturbs the flow. Please. So, if such a patient is there with homeopathy and he finds it out, the whole case, he finds it out that headache is one-sided, it is aggravated as the sun rises, it goes at the top, and whenever in the noon phase, as sun aggravates, it aggravates. It aggravated by light, it aggravated by noise, and he never wants to get mixed. He wants to remain alone. He is weeping alone. He is in becomes absent-minded. He cannot concentrate, and his face is absolutely greasy. Whole totality you get. Now you have a remedy which covers this whole totality. Because we are not prescribing for the migraine, we are prescribing for the patient who is expressing this, and we have judged one remedy. For example, we have judged the natrium and we have given it in 1M potency. 1M natrium is not a material natrium. 1M natrium is the dynamic natrium which works in the same plane as the natural disease has worked. Natural disease has developed because of the dynamic derangement, because of disappointment. So nothing material entered in the body, but still the vital force gets deranged. Now your remedy, which is based upon the similarity, here the nature's law of cure will work. Whatever medicine you are giving will work in the same plane because it doesn't carry a medicine. It is just a stimulus. So that disease which is in dynamic plane is treated with the dynamic medicine, and the nature's law of cure will work. The weaker dynamic affection is permanently extinguished in the living organism by a stronger one, if latter, whilst differing in kind, is very similar to former in its manifestation. And then that patient will be cured because the original natural disease will be vanished. So vital force will be free, and patient is again regains the strength. He comes out, he starts understanding this can happen in life, and then person can get cured. See, this is the difference between the homeopathic aspect of treating the patient and allopathic aspect of treating the patient. Here we take into consideration a medicine which works at the same plane and which cures the patient at the same plane. Medicines, therefore, cannot affect the high and the interior planes of the physical economy unless they are raised to the plane of similarity in quality. The individuals who need sulfur in the very highest degrees may take sulfur sufficient to move his bowels, may rub it upon the skin, may wear it in his stockings, can take sulfur baths, all without effect upon his disease. In that form, the drug is not in correspondence with his sickness. It does not affect him in the same plane in which he is sick, and so it cannot affect the cause and flow from thence to the circumference. So with all coarser drugs, they do not cure. We sometimes see outermost effects of the disease. This is located in the outer planes, temporarily removed by local potencies and crude drugs, but it is only as to the exteriors and ultimates that the cure is effected. And as it does not reach the innermost degrees, it is not permanent. So what he is explaining? He is explaining one more example. He has given the example of the sulfur. So if, for example, patient comes to you with some manifestation, and that patient for whom you find it out a remedy is sulfur. So his complaint is, for example, constipation with acid peptic trouble, with a typical heart patient, theorizing patient, philosophy ability for with severe heat in the body, it will felt better by cold application, all those things, and you choose the sulfur. What he says, if you apply the sulfur to his exterior part in the crude form, if you give sulfur to him, which kept in his stockings or anywhere, this sulfur will not going to produce any change over there in the crude form. If there are any manifestations on the skin that might vanish because of crude sulfur application over there, but that will also not get cured. It will either just palliated, either suppressed. But if you want to treat that patient with on the basis of law of similars, you have to give the sulfur in potentized form because the natural disease also happened in dynamic plane. Your remedy should be in the dynamic plane. We should work in the dynamic plane. So here, if you want to give a sulfur to the patient, you have to give it 30, 200, 1 m, depending upon the susceptibility, depending upon the presentation, whether acute or chronic, all things which you have to take into consideration and find it out a right remedy, which will cure that patient. So here one has to understand what Kent wants to say. Kent wants to say if the disease is dynamic plane, it cannot be cured by the crude drugs. It should be treated with the dynamic medicines only. And what he says further, in acute diseases, also the crude drugs sometimes accomplish their purpose because the outermost which they affect is only on surface and the innermost has in the acute disease the tendency to go away from of itself. If his life can simply be spared until the disease has run its course, the patient will recover. But the chronic miasm are only reached as to their ultimate symptoms, and these are caused to subside only temporarily or are suppressed by the action of crude or ultimate forms of medicine. See what he is explaining. He is explaining that sometimes it might happen that in acute presentation, a patient has certain disorder where some manifestations which are most external happen, and you have given any medicine in crude form and which is applied externally or which has been used locally. Patient's course in acute disease, what is the definition? They are self-limiting diseases. There is a period of prodrome, then period of progress, and there is a period of decline. If within a span of a week, if the patient's whole symptoms disappear, whether you apply medicine or not applied medicine, this acute disease is self-recoverable disease. So many times in acutes, even such crude drugs may show its effects and patient might feel well, but he is not cured. Or if he would have been it would have been cured, it is just because it was natural tendency to recover. But things are rather different in chronics. No chronic disease will be cured by local means. If you just treat rheumatoid arthritis by local means, by applying the local ointments, painkillers, or if you give any steroids, non-steroidal antimalarials, you find it out that it is only a palliative, it is not at all curative. It never recovers the patient permanently. If you take a name of any chronic disease and just see whether crude medicines cured the patient, you will find they are not at all cured. You will find they are only palliated, and after long palliation, they are suppressed. They went to the innermost organs. So, what he wants to explain over there, the dynamic disorders should be treated with the help of dynamic medicines only. External medicines never cures the or external treatment, crude treatment never cures the dynamic disorder. What he further says, I look back upon time when my own mind was in a cloud as to this subject. As if I refer to it here, it may be of use to you. I remember when I first read from Hahnemann that potentized medicines would cure the sick, that it seemed to me a mystery. I had no knowledge upon which to found beliefs in such things. So Kent is saying his own experience, how this has happened. It is very interesting example, very interesting. Just read and you will learn that how Kent started believing in homeopathy. I had no knowledge upon which to find belief in such things. I began to practice with lower potencies and with the crude drugs in attempting to carry out law. But with these means, I was able to cure only superficial complaints. My work was far from satisfactory. Yet it was somewhat better than old thing. It was milder than physicking and purging and emission. Of course, I rested upon my opinions and belief for my knowledge. Everyone does that. So what he said, he started his own practice and he was not believing on the Hahnemann regarding the potentized medicine. And he has started homeopathic practice and he said it is little bit better because I am using it in mm, uh, very early potencies or only crude drug, but very less amount because in old school they used to use a very larger doses. So I was satisfied, but I was not satisfied up to the level because I have not seen such types of cures. So what he said, there was fear in my mind, or there was a um, question in my mind whether really this potentized medicines works. I was not in doubt. Later, I saw resolved to the test the 30th potency to see if there was not yet medicine in it. And I prepared with my own hands the 30th potency of podophyllum with water, uncentesimal scale, after the fashion of Hahnemann, having been told that water was as good as alcohol and it was only attenuation that was required. This was during an epidemic of diarrhea that looked like podophyllum, but I had no courage to give the 30th and still continued to use my stronger medicines. What he says, I don't have a courage to give 30th potential podophyllum because I was in doubt 30th never contains medicine, how it will act. That was his thought. And that's why he was giving the crude drugs only. One day, a child was brought into my office in the madrasa. She brought it in hastily, and it did not seem as if it could live long. So there was a child was brought who was having severe diarrhea with dehydration, as if he was going to die. It was an infant, and while it lay in her arms, a thin, yellowish, fecal stool ran over my carpet. The odor struck me as like that I had been reading about the odor of podophyllum stool. It was horribly offensive, stinking, and stool was so copious that mother made the remark that she did not know where it all came from. So that diarrhea was very profuse, it was very offensive, it was yellowish, everything. I said to myself, this is a case upon which I to test Hahnemann's 30th potency. So I fixed up some podophyllum 30 and put it on child's tongue and sent the mother home, fearing that child would soon die as it was very ill, face pinched, drawn, cadaveric, and dreadful odor about it. Next morning, when making my rounds, I had to pass the house. So wherever she used to stay, he used to pass from the same street. I expected to see the crepe on the door. I did not dare to call, though I was very much worried about it. So I drove fast, but there was no crepe on the door. So he said that there I was in fear that whether that child was died, or that was in my mind that he will not survive and there will be something going on. But there was no crepe on the door. I drove home again that way, although it was quite a distance out of my way, and still there was no crepe on the door. But standing in the doorway was grandmother, who said, Doctor, the baby is all right this morning. Then I began to feel better, thinking I had not killed it. I had not killed it. Perhaps some of you have been in the same state of mind. So he's explaining that when that grandmother told that child is completely better after your medicines next day, then I believed, yes, Hahnemann's potency worked. Then Kent has started believing that 30th potency, which never carries original medicine, still it works. So it is an experience, personal experience, which gives you a confidence or guarantee. So Kent was also a person who was so brilliant, was not he was in doubt regarding the potentized method. See, this is the story of a Kent, and what about the rest of the people? How easily they can believe? That little child did not need any more medicine. After that, I had quite a number of podophyllum cases. The 30 did the work to my astonishment. It was different from anything I had ever seen. The cures were almost instantaneous. It seemed as if there would be no more stool after the first dose of medicine. I did not always give the single dose. I used that 30th all the season and they made up my mind that if the 30th of podophyllum was good, other the 30th should also be, and I ought to have as many of them as possible. I made a good many 30 by hand and finally succeeded in making up 126 remedies, some of them in the 200 potency, and these I used. Then I procured a set of 200 and higher and practiced with them. I followed on this way. And in few years, I discovered that by giving higher and higher potencies, the remedy seems to operate more and more interiorly. See, this is how the conversion of and came from crude drugs to the potentized drugs happened. And he was the first person who has potentized it to the same potency. The person who was not believing in the dynamic doses started believing on the 30th, and then he prepared 200, then 1M, then 10M, CM. All those potencies were prepared by the king. So this is how experience teaches us. And that experience thought came regarding the dynamic doses. And that's why he was confident while explaining all those things regarding it. I found that chronic case that would be relieved by moderately high potencies would only improve for a matter of weeks. But on the administration of much higher potencies, the work would be taken up, and in that way, same patient would be carried on from one potency to another. If I give you the conversation of one patient with me from time to time, you may understand better what I mean. I saw this patient for the first time some 15 years ago when he was stoop-shouldered and had a fairly physical aspect. He had a cathedral state of the chest, and it looked as though it might end in thesis. On his symptoms, he received sulfur about 6 a.m. He was violently aggravated by this dose of medicine. All his symptoms were made worse, and he came back to the office saying that medicine had made me sick. I had attained knowledge of aggravation from a similar remedy, so I gave him sugar. At the end of another week, he came back and told me he was better, much better, that he did not want me to give him any more of that first medicine, but wanted more of the last, as it had made him so better, so much better. So I kept him on the medicine, which pleased him for a period of probably 6 to 7 weeks. One time he returned and told me he did not want that last medicine, but he wanted the medicine that helped him so. By that I knew enough to give him another dose of sulfur. Within the next day or two, he ran in and said, "You young rascal, you gave me that medicine that made me sick in the first place." So he got sugar again and went on this time for 5 to 6 weeks and perhaps longer. Then he came back again, saying, "Now I do not think you understand me, for I am having my old symptoms back. I wish you would study my case again." So I went all over his case, and he got another dose of sulfur 6M. He reported this time, "Well, I do not feel any better. I am just about the same." He was not stirred up this time. You see, I waited a little longer and saw no relief from the last dose. Here are all symptoms calling for sulfur. Shall I give him crude sulfur? I cannot give him a remedy that is not indicated. The experience of older men says, "Go higher." I gave him sulfur 55 am, and in few days he came back to me and saying, "You rascal, you give me the first medicine again. I don't want that stuff." Finally, I got him cooled down, gave him some sugar, and assured that he would be better in a few days. And he went on for 6 to 7 weeks with great improvement. After a while, I explained to him that when the remedy did not act, I had to go give him something to stir him up. Of course, I did not say anything to him about the sugar. So he has given the complete personal experience how the homeopathic aggravation happened, and that taught him how to go ahead with the higher potency. And if the remedy is same and if the remedy is perfect one. So he has given wonderful experience of his life regarding it. And regarding same patient, what he says, when you have learned what your medicine will do, it is a good thing to say to the patient. Do not be alarmed or astonished when such and such things happen. So whenever patient comes to you and when you give the remedy and you get, patient tells you before after prescribing medicine, it is better to tell him it might happen. You tell him that there might be some such type of aggravation, there might be some original problem, skin manifestation might appear. If you tell them prior, then patient never worries. But if you don't tell them regarding all those things, then patient goes into another state. They feel that it is a side effect of the remedy. So you have to explain all those things when you are giving the medicines to the patient. So that caution he is explaining. This is a better way of telling the patient that it might produce such and such reaction. If it happens, don't worry at all. Please do come when we'll find a right medicine. And don't tell that we are giving the placebos to the patient. That is also a caution which he has mentioned over there. I think we'll stop over here. We'll continue with this same in tomorrow, and tomorrow we'll finish this session. Not tomorrow. Tomorrow is Saturday. We'll meet on Monday and we'll finish this chapter on Monday. So that's all for today. And thank you being there. My suggestion to all of you, be there at 8:30 with another new remedy which is complementary to the sulfur is allosocotrine. So we'll learn in today's Mathematical session the allosocotrine. Any queries are there? We have a chat, otherwise we'll conclude. Any question, query? So shall I conclude? Yes, we'll meet on Monday and today night at 30. Thank you.